Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film April and the Extraordinary World. April and the Extraordinary World might feel like a film that isn't very mainstream. It's a French animated cartoon with an alternate history setting. You'd think that that doesn't sound like something a mainstream audience or a normal person could watch, but it really has a lot more in common with a big blockbuster than it does a strange art house film, where probably most of you, if you do see this in theaters, will see it, at least in America. I think that's kind of interesting. It probably says a lot about how we view animation and animation from foreign countries, just because it's in another foreign language. We have to, of course, act like it's somehow not fit for mainstream audiences, but this is very much a fun adventure movie that is ready for mainstream audiences. If someone told me they were going to make a live-action remake of April and the Extraordinary World and it would open in mainstream theaters, I would believe it, because this film works perfectly for that. But it's also a very fun adventure movie. We don't really get a lot of fun adventure movies like this anymore. Kind of reminds me a lot of Indiana Jones or Tintin, probably because the graphic novel that this is based on, which I believe translated from French is called April in the Twisted World, which is actually, in some places they list the title of this movie as that, but to my understanding in America it's April in the Extraordinary World. The original graphic novel by Jacques Tardy, or Tardy as I believe he's called in France, was very influenced by Hergé and Hergé's Tintin comics, and so this almost feels like a much better animated, a lot more exciting Tintin cartoon, the one they used to play on Nickelodeon early in the morning. But the thick outlines and the way the character designs are feel more like Hergé's style. It really does feel like the fun Tintin cartoon we never really got, with crazier action sequences than you could ever dream of. So like Spielberg's Tintin with less of motion capture and more traditional animation behind it. And it's a real fun, wild ride of a movie. It's kind of hard to explain the whole plot to people and how its weird setting makes sense. But once you get past all that, you'll be in a fun thrill ride that you'd expect from a mainstream blockbuster movie, but instead it's animated and in French. An alternate history where Napoleon III ruled France, he came to a scientist's place and he was going to have a monkey army with this serum that this scientist was making, but then while he is getting mad at the scientist, chemicals run together and there's an explosion and it kills this scientist. That is a relative of April's, and then after that, various scientists start disappearing for the next 70 years. So then in the 30s, where the world is still in the age of steam and everything, we still have like steam locomotives and cable cars and everything like that. And April's parents, who are two scientists who are trying to make the ultimate serum, then tracked down by the police, who are trying to get any scientists they can to work for the government before they vanish into thin air like all the other scientists have. As they're trying to escape from the police, April's parents are taken away somehow, mysteriously vanish in a lightning storm. She is left on her own as an orphan, where she then 10 years later in the 40s takes up science with their cat, who suddenly talks because he was given kind of a form of the ultimate serum. And so her and this talking cat are trying to figure out the ultimate serum, especially because the cat is getting weaker and weaker and getting closer to death, so she wants to save her lifelong friend. And as she does, the police and the government is interested in finding out how she did it, as well as her father, who is talking to her from this robot rat or something, as she goes on a crazy adventure to find out all the mysteries that have been going on in this crazy alternate history world and be reunited with her parents once again. This film does remind me a lot of Tintin and the constant complaint of Tintin, and that is Tintin is almost more about this story than the character. And although we do have a certain dimension to the character of April, who's voiced by Marion Cotillard, at least in the French version, I never felt like this film was really as much about character as the adventure. Now, the adventure in this film is so dense that it doesn't really feel like Tintin, in that Tintin always has a lot of exposition and a lot of stuff going on, but this just felt very interesting and also strange and crazy because it had so many things it needed to explain. I mean, the opening part of the film is all backstory and explaining this alternate history and all the minutia behind it, and it really did feel like a movie based on a long-running comic book, and they tried to put 100 or some issues together. I don't really understand if it was just a graphic novel or it was a one-shot or it was an ongoing monthly series by Jacques Tardy, but that's kind of how this film felt. It was so top-heavy. By the time we get to the point where April is an adult and we're really into the plot of the movie, it feels like we're like 20 to 30 minutes in, and this movie isn't that long. It's interesting. It's an interesting idea, but it does feel like someone went a little too crazy with the alternate history. It is one of those things that, like, wow, that's like thought-provoking. You can think about, like, oh, so they had the Age of of coal, and they ran out of coal, so now it's charcoal, and how, you know, everything is covered in soot, and a lot of people are wearing gas masks because they'll be coughing all the time, and how they're at war with America, trying to get the Canadian wilderness to keep charcoal going, and how there was kind of no World War I and World War II because France became a world power in this alternate timeline, which is very like of that country where they're like, my country rules the world in my alternate history. It was still had that fun, thrilling adventure to it. The adventure of this film absolutely works. It's just all the backstory of it holds it down from really being more about character. You understand who April is, it's just more about the adventure. And that's really what you should be getting from April in the Extraordinary World. That's the thrillness of it, that's the fun of it, and that's what works the best about it. So I kind of understand if that's really ultimately the takeaway, and what this film is best at is doing the adventure of it. And you don't really get enough animated adventure films, especially in America, so it was kind of refreshing in that end. But I would almost recommend this film to anyone who wants to get into French animation, or anyone who wants to get their kids into different kinds of animation, because it is so digestible for a modern mainstream audience. Even though I just talked about alternate histories is very strange, and first you go, I don't know dick about French history, so I guess that's different. But it is strange in what it's doing, but the whole adventure, and you have lizards with laser guns at a certain point, that can appeal to anyone. People who see Star Wars movies and superhero movies can get this movie. It's not too complex, it's just strange in its whole setting, but you know, Star Wars is strange in its setting if you really get down to it. So April Extraordinary World is kind of like a film that I kind of wish had a bigger release, because I think more people would actually see it. Probably not in French. This is released in both. There's a French version and an English dub. I actually saw it in French. I can't speak on the English dub. I like to see animated films in their original language, because it does bug me because they do not change the lip sync. It's a really beautiful looking film. It's cool to see, like, I guess it's steampunk. It's not really, no one's dressed in steampunk. It's just like the age of steam and all these steam ideas and trolley cars and steam ships, and it is in that way steampunk. But if you're into steampunk, you'd be like, nobody's dressed like steampunk, but it is kind of like a steampunk setting, I guess is the best way to describe it. And it is interesting to have such a rich world building kind of thing. I guess this is almost world building over everything else, but its strangeness is almost what leads to the fun of the adventure, because you do feel like a little kid playing, but not in the shitty Batman vs Superman way, more in the amazing adventure wonderfulness of imagination kind of way. It almost feels like they know no bounds with this, and they just kind of went off into crazy land, but in a fun, controlled adventure way in a lot of it. That is the thing with this, is while I was watching, I was like, you know, I don't get enough of these. I don't get enough of fun adventure type of films, and I think that's the wonderful thing about April in the Extraordinary World. You don't see enough adventure films with a strong female protagonist, and that she's not really sexualized or anything like that. And this does fall into the tradition of fun European adventure films, reminding me of Indiana Jones. I mean, you have to be blind not for it to remind you of Tintin. It's very much like Tintin, but even fucking weirder. Tintin is a lot more about the adventure, much like this is, but this is about the adventure and their weird alternate history crap. It has so many different settings and so many things to explain. I almost feel like this film should be longer, or this is something that should be covered in a TV show, not in a movie. It almost feels a little inappropriate that they tried to stuff all this in there. I mean, it kind of works for itself, and I didn't think it was a bad movie. It's just a lot of ground to cover for one movie, a lot of issues and a lot of different circumstances and settings that it really needs to go over, so they can go from one setting to another and fight this lizard and talking cats and, you know, police going after them, and just so many different characters and background characters. It does a good job of wrestling all of that. It doesn't get lost in that. It's because it's so steady on the adventure. It just like manages to get it all to work within that adventure, rather than getting kind of boggled down by having all this information through it. It has some really thrilling, amazing action sequences, and it did remind me of Spielberg's Tintin in a lot of ways. The opening sequence where her parents are running from the police was really thrilling and awe-inspiring and beautifully animated, and it reminds you how much fun a great action animation sequence can really be. I would recommend this to the average viewer. If you are into animation and you like action or adventure shows and you're waiting for an animated adventure film and it's been a while, I would recommend this. But even for someone who you're not going to watch Fantastic Planet or weirder foreign animation, this is a good film to get you into it. This is a good film to bring you over to that side, because it's not too hard to watch. Yeah, it's strange and there's all this alternate history crap. You can get past that, I guess, and then just get into the adventure. And everybody likes a good adventure story. Everyone can get into the propulsive energy of a good adventure. And April in the Extraordinary World understands the propulsivity of a good adventure. adventure film and moving with that adventure and getting into that adventure and giving you that flow of fun entertainment that can whisk you off to a crazy alternate history world and not think about your troubles and just worry about April and her talking cat hopefully being reunited with her parents and making a weird serum and lizards with laser guns. April in the Extraordinary World really loves the fun adventureness of it, and it's fun to watch that as an audience. But as crazy and strange as it is, there's nothing like watching a really fun adventure film no matter what language it's in. So if you have seen April in the Extraordinary World and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.